All right, guys, how's it going? Illuminastic here. We're on our sixth, I guess, episode of the Kybalion Explained. Last time we were talking about the all in all. Now we're on chapter 8, the planes of correspondence, or the principle of correspondence, which is basically the really, really super famous Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above. It's been expressed a number of different ways, sometimes as that which is above is like that which is below, and that which is within is like that which is without. There's also a really great Kabbalistic version. How does it go? Keter is in Malkut, and Malkut is in Keter, but after another fashion. And when I particularly like that expression of it because Keter, of course, is the divine light, and Malkut is matter. And these two things have, for their substance, the same material, which is basically light. So it's always really inspiring and encouraging when we find these ancient mystical statements that reflect discoveries in modern science. Um, and so I wanted to address something that Mr. Charles said in the last stream, because I was talking about how the four fields of physics interact to create consciousness, which is the quintessence, the fifth field. Um, in the same way that the four elements are necessary to create the arena where consciousness exists, right? That you cannot have consciousness without, matter to support us and air for us to breathe and water for us to drink and so on. So, and then, the fire, the spiritual energy. And so this is a perfect example of as above, so below, or Keter is in Malkut, Malkut is in Keter. It's that reflective um, nature of the structure of the universe that we live in. So I think Mr. Charles said, I don't know if you can include gravity, and I would have to say that yes, you can, because it exerts an influence on these other fields. It is a field. Consciousness is also a field. This is something that I have felt like I understood ever since the first time I ate mushrooms and saw this, I guess, a visible field. In the air at night, you can see this big web of translucent colors, and I always felt that I was looking at the material substance of the universal consciousness. And so let's dive in here. The great second Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony, agreement, and correspondence between the several planes of manifestation, life, and being. This truth is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source, and the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit or combination of units of activity, as each manifests its own phenomena upon its own plane. For the purpose of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena, known as the three great planes, namely the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the three divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, the lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point that of spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard and fast division may be made between the higher phenomena of the physical and the lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion of, or explanation of, the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to give a general description of the same at this point. Um, at the beginning, we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word plane, which term has been very freely used and very poorly explained in many recent works upon the subject of occultism. The question is generally about as follows. Is a plane or a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of dimension in a scale subject to measurement. I think what he's trying to say is field. Um, it sounds like maybe he just didn't have the language, uh, but I think that's what's being referenced here. Um, Somewhat paradoxical, is it not? But let us examine the matter. A dimension, you know, is a measure in a straight line, relating to measure, etc. The ordinary dimensions of space are length, breadth, and height, or perhaps length, breadth, height, thickness, or circumference. But there is another dimension of created things, or measure in a straight line, known to occultists and to scientists as well, although the latter have not as yet applied the term dimension to it. And this new dimension, which, by the way, is the much speculated about fourth dimension, is the standard used in determining the degrees or planes. This is another interesting. I'm going to have to beg to differ, Mr. Charles. I understand that it's not a field in the same way, but everything is a reflection of this fundamental structure, I guess. And so we have, four elements, and then we have the fifth element being what we call spirit or conscious awareness. You can think of the four directions as well. But if you have them in a flat plane until you add this up and down dimension, and which would be the quintessence relative to the four directions. Now we have five, and now we have space and the potentiality for things to exist and move and live within this space. So no matter what context or what aspect of our reality you're talking about, you're going to have these four fundamental sort of points, and then this fifth that's sort of this more um, um, subtle element that's equally important, but is also defined and generated by the other four, if that makes sense. Um, so the fourth dimension may be called the dimension of vibration. It is a fact well known to modern science as well as to the Hermetists uh, who have embodied the truth in their third Hermetic principle that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. From the highest manifestation to the lowest, everything and all things vibrate. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but as in different directions and in a different manner. The degrees of the rate of vibration constitute the degrees of measurement on the scale of vibration. In other words, the degrees of the fourth dimension. And these degrees form what occultists call planes. The higher the degree of rate of vibration, the higher the plane, and the higher the manifestation of life occupying that plane. So that while a plane is not a place, nor yet a state or condition, yet it possesses qualities common to both. Again, it sounds like a field. We shall have more to say regarding the subject of the scale of vibrations in our next lesson, in which we will consider the Hermetic principle of vibration. You will kindly remember, however, that the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomena of the universe. Just got brighter in here. Uh, um, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermeticists in order to aid in the thought and study of the various degrees and forms of universal activity and life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the being of the archangel are all but degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same. The difference between being solely a matter of degree and rate of vibration. All are creations of the all and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the all. The Hermeticists subdivide each of the three great planes into seven minor planes, and each of these latter are also subdivided into seven planes, all divisions being more or less arbitrary, shading into each other, and adopted merely for convenience of scientific study and thought. The great physical plane and its seven minor planes is that division of the phenomena of the universe which includes all things that relate to physics or material things, forces, and manifestation. It includes all forms of that which we call matter and all forms of that which we call energy or force. But you must remember that the Hermetic philosophy does not recognize matter as a thing in itself, or as having a separate existence even in the mind of the all. The teachings are that matter is but a form of energy, that is, energy at a low rate of vibration of a certain kind. And accordingly, the Hermeticists classify matter under the head of energy and give to it three of the seven minor planes of the great physical plane. These seven minor physical planes are as follows: the plane of matter A, the plane of matter B, the plane of matter C, the plane of ethereal substance, the plane of energy. Well, three planes of energy, three planes of matter, and one of ethereal substance. I honestly don't know what he's talking about right now. I don't know what those are references to, how, maybe he's going to explain. Okay, he will explain. The plane of matter comprises the form of matter in the form of solids, liquids, and gases. Ah, okay, all right. I feel him now, I guess. As generally recognized by the textbooks on physics, the plane of matter comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter, of the existence of which modern science is but now recognizing. The phenomena of radiant matter and its phases of radium, etc., belong into the lower subdivision of this minor plane. The plane of matter comprises forms of the most subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which is not suspected by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which science speaks of as the ether, a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity, pervading all universal space and acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy such as light, heat, electricity, etc. This ethereal substance forms a connecting link between matter and energy and partakes of the nature of each. The Hermetic teachings, however, instruct that this plane has seven subdivisions, as have all the minor planes, and that in fact there are seven ethers instead of but one. Um, the way, a rainbow may give us some insight into what he's describing here. And it's also interesting that, in the Bible, it talks about how the rainbow is God's covenant with the earth. And to me, if I was talking about God's covenant with the earth, I would think that that would reference like some sort of revelation or proof, or revelation of how his works are constructed. Um, by the way, make sure you catch the next mystery school commentary that I'm going to do, because this, I don't know how this it didn't hit me harder, but when we were doing the last installment, it really kind of struck me how explicitly the Bible paints the clear picture that Jesus is just a metaphor for the sun, like walking on water is just light reflecting on water. Without light, which gives knowledge and life, there's no salvation. I mean, completely crazy. And so that reference to the rainbow and refracted light just remind me to plug that. Also, I think that um, it's worthy of noting here that all of the elements, um, with the exception of air. Air is more difficult for me to figure out the correlations. But water, for example, he's talking about how there are these three planes of matter. And, in scientific speak, we would say that, water can be a gas, or it can freeze and become, solid matter. Uh, so, well, I guess in the occult tradition, you would say that water is giving its airy quality, right? Air of water would be steam. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but that's basically, um, a real world investiture of this understanding of the three planes of matter. That that even a fundamental element like water can take forms that reflect what he's calling other planes of matter. Next, above the plane of ethereal substance, comes the plane of energy, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science, its seven subplanes being respectively heat, light, magnetism, electricity, and attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, chemical affinity, etc. and several other forms of energy indicated by scientific experiments, but not as yet named or classified. The plane of energy comprises 7 subplanes of higher forms of energy, not as yet discovered by science, but which have been called nature's finer forces, and which are called into operation in manifestations of certain forms of mental phenomena, and by which phenomena become possible. The plane of energy comprises 7 subplanes of energy so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, but which is not recognized by the minds of men on the ordinary plane of development, being available for the use of beings on the spiritual plane alone. Such energy is unthinkable to ordinary man, and may be considered almost as the divine power. The beings employing the same are as gods compared even to the highest human types known to us. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things known to us in ordinary life, as well as certain other forms not so well known except to the occultist. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work. But we may as well mention them. They are as follows: the plane of mineral mind, the plane of elemental mind, the plane of plant mind, the plane of elemental mind, the plane of animal mind, the plane of elemental mind again, the plane of human mind. Um, these are kind of interesting because one of the things that I've noticed about the DMT entities, for example, which I just found out that what's his name, Alex Jones called them retarded gremlins, which I have met beings there that would be like the most apt way to describe for sure. But what's interesting to me about these characterizations of mind is that those beings often seem to be like avatars or representatives of these different entelechies, the vegetable world, the insectoid, like the mantids that are always operating on people's brains, the the metallic um, bees. A lot of people call them. I think Terence McKenna called them that. Um, I don't know if they're bees exactly, but they're definitely like intelligent organisms that fly around that appear to be made of elemental matter. Um, so it's interesting that I think in the DMT realm, these different characterizations of archetypal forms of consciousness, um, it seems that we can interact with them and that they we have evidence that this is true. Uh, The plane of mineral mind comprises the states or conditions of the units or entities or groups and combinations of the same, which animate the forms known to us as minerals, chemicals, etc. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form and not himself. These entities may be called souls in one sense, and are living beings of a low degree of development, life, and mind, just a little more than the units of living energy, which comprise the higher subdivisions of the highest physical plane. There's one theory of consciousness. I can't remember the researcher's name. I'm going to do a video on it eventually because it's actually, he's a sound scientist with I think 2 PhDs, and he's basically suggesting that all things are conscious to some degree. Of course, this is a really common Native American belief, and just as he's describing here, his theory is that the more dense, like a rock, has some kind of fundamental consciousness, but its density is what determines that it's at such a low vibration that it has a very low, receptivity to consciousness, which is this field that we're sort of picking up like bioantennas, and then it's sort of filtered through our being. Our brain is almost like a thumbprint, or I mean, I'm sure there's a better analogy, but it's like you run the universal mind through the wrinkles and folds and the experiences and memories that your brain informs it, and that sort of translates the greater consciousness into the individual consciousness, almost in the same way that a laser reads a CD. So really interesting theory, and I'll do a full video on that at some point. Another thing that this has made me think about reading over this is it's been a number of years. Um, Yeah, I know. I mean, the guy's kind of a jackass, but when he called them retarded gremlins, I mean, most of the time, I quit smoking DMT for many years because I felt like the DMT entities are almost always they're just nonsense. Like I really rarely got anything that I felt was useful. Ayahuasca is a lot different. It's like slowed down. There's a lot more coherent information usually. But yeah, the retarded gremlin thing really, it's hard to believe that he hasn't smoked DMT because it's like, how did he come up with that terminology to even describe them as retarded gremlins? Um, another aspect of this, he's talking about how at very, very basic fundamental levels, the energy in the universe has a very, very basic fundamental consciousness. And, I was talking in the last stream I did, I don't know if it was the Kybalion or not, but how, researchers at Princeton have confirmed, I think it's called the Xeno Effect. Um, don't quote me on that. Uh, I haven't read the study all the way either yet, but the summary was basically that they have absolutely confirmed with absolute certainty that atoms behave differently when they're being measured than when they're not. Um, and so, this definitely implies some sort of awareness. Um, but then again, how much can an atom do in experience? I think that our consciousness is developed through our experiences and through our experiences fundamentally. And so if you have a very, very basic existence, I would imagine that your level of consciousness is, very, very basic. The other interesting aspect of that, though, is that these atoms are very much immaterial, which means their density isn't very high. So they could have better access to the greater consciousness than we do. All of this remains to be seen. But what I was saying is that one of the things that reading this has made me wonder is exactly what was the state of physics when this book was written. And some of the concepts, are at least a little bit older that we can verify for sure. Well, I mean, hell, Plato is the one that conceived of the idea of atoms. Um, so it'd be interesting to see exactly where science was at in relation to the ideas that are presented in this book at the time. Maybe if I have the time, I'll try to get some kind of idea of that. Um, the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles have their loves and hates, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non affinities, etc. And some of the more daring of modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will, emotions, and feelings of the atoms differ only in degree from those of men. We have no time or space to argue this matter here. That's what I'm for. All occultists know it to be a fact, and others are referred to some of the most recent scientific works for outside corroborations. There are the usual seven subdivisions in this plane. And of course, what he's talking about is that some chemicals bond, some repel. The same is true of different types of energetic charges, molecules, particles. Um, so it is true that all of these fundamental building block elements of the universe have attractions and repulsions and different sort of reactions that directly reflect the basic responses and reactions that humans have, whether they be mostly emotional, psychological, um, kind of interesting. And again, it's more proof of that as above, so below. And it's another example of this, the real true technique here is basically just observation of the natural world. And the more we're able to dive into this, the more sophisticated our understanding of the natural universe becomes, the more this sort of wisdom that's presented in the Kybalion and some other ancient texts is confirmed. Um, so the plane of elemental mind comprises the state or condition and degree of mental and vital development of a class of entities unknown to the average man, but recognized to occultists. They are invisible to the ordinary senses of man, but nevertheless exist and play their part of the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand and of the entities of the plant kingdom on the other. There are seven subdivisions on this plane also, and that actually kind of blows my mind because I've noticed that, and that's something I've been every time he talks about these beings and entities on other planes. I'm always kind of almost compelled to butt in and say, I'm still not convinced that these entities that we encounter with DMT or in occult ritual magic or through meditation or however it happens have their own substantive existence, their own subjective point of view, their own objective reality, at least in the same way that we do. And I never noticed that before. He's actually saying that they're not really on the same order of consciousness that we are. And that's what I've always felt like. And that's one of the reasons I've been hesitant to really give them um, their own, to acknowledge them as like really existing spiritual beings. There are some crazy things that have happened in that regard. I've been informed of things with high accuracy that actually came to pass. There's the comedian. Oh my God, what is his name? And his purple girlfriend, Shane Mouse. You guys can find this on YouTube. He has this DMT girlfriend that he said he was spending all his time with her, and she's like a twin flame or a soulmate. They've known each other for thousands of years, and so one time he told her, "I need you to prove to me that this isn't all just in my head, that you're actually real." And so his friend came over, and he's like, "Here, smoke this DMT." And the guy does it, and then a few minutes into the DMT, he says, "Hey, Shane, there's this purple chick here that told me to tell you hello." And these little guys running around, I guess there were these dwarves or machine elves or something running around too. I forgot to mention that, but they were there as well. Um, so, things like that, and the specificity of these visions, I mean, I watched someone that had never heard of Terence McKenna smoke DMT. This was many, many years ago before he was such a ubiquitous, like almost a prophet of the psychedelic movement. Um, she smoked the DMT and she started describing the machine elves and the Rubik's cubes, and they were saying the same shit to her that they said, "What is that?" But again, I've tried to test them and really see if they, can interact with us in the way that I would interact with a human, and it's not like that exactly. Something's off. Um, so, anyways, it's interesting that he acknowledged that here. The plane of plant mind in its seven subdivisions comprises the states or conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world, the vital and mental phenomena of which is fairly well understood by the average intelligent person. Many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants have been published during the last decade. Plants have life, mind, and souls as well as have the animals, man, and Superman. The plane of elemental mind B and its seven subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of a higher form of elemental or unseen entities playing their part in the general work of the universe, the mind and life of which form a part of the scale between the plane of plant mind and the plane of animal mind, the entities partaking of the nature of both. The plane of animal mind and its seven subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of the entities, beings, or souls animating the animal forms of life familiar to all of us. It is not necessary to go into detail regarding this kingdom or plane of life, for the animal world is as familiar to us as our own. I mean, kind of. Definitely that pig I ran into earlier today was not familiar to Nagwal. I think it was the first time he'd really seen one up close. It was huge, man, and it started like, making its big, loud, snorting noises right in his face, and he just lost his mind. But it was hilarious when I picked him up and I was like, okay, let's go. He like waved to the pig, bye bye, even though it had just made him piss himself. Um, anyways, the plane of elemental mind and its seven subdivisions comprises these entities or beings invisible as are all such elemental forms, which partake of the nature of both animal and human life in a degree and in certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. Fair enough. And, before I encountered this work, I had this sort of conception of this sort of infinite um, infinite what am I trying to say? The range, like a range of frequencies, or better words, but and so there's like a level of intelligence to fulfill every possibility across the entire range. There are males that have an infinite possibility of like falling somewhere on the scale of masculinity or and femininity. So it's like there are these almost infinite or possibly infinite frequency ranges for all of these different characteristics, including consciousness. And I think that's what he's describing here are these delineations, as if there are, um, spectrums. Uh, it's like it's red, and then it's blue, and then it's green, and so it's elemental, it's plant, it's animal. Um, when the way I conceived of it, it was much more just fluid, uh, but it's an interesting conception. Okay, so the plane of human mind and its seven subdivisions comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are common to man in his various grades, degrees, and divisions. Oh, well, that's a more concise way of saying what I just said. In this connection, we wish to point out the fact that the average man of today occupies but the fourth subdivision of the plane of human mind, and only the most intelligent have crossed the border of the fifth subdivision. It has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more years for the race to move on to the sixth and seventh subdivisions and beyond. Interesting correlation there. A lot of people talk about how we're moving into fifth dimensional consciousness or 5D. And so I don't know if those new age ideas were influenced by this book. I feel like the Kybalion only kind of got popular in pop culture within the last few years. Um, so, it could be that this is an actual observation. I've always intuitively felt that it was true, that we're legitimately moving into a new aeon. But I think it's interesting that he is congruent with this idea that it's the fifth, um, which is in music a power chord, which is kind of a nice thought. Um, it has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more years for the race to move on to the sixth and seventh subdivisions and beyond. But remember that there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees and then on to higher planes. Our own race is the fifth, with stragglers from the fourth, lots of those, uh, which has set foot upon the path. And then there are a few advanced souls of our own race who have outstripped the masses and who have passed on to the sixth and seventh subdivision, and some few being still further on. The man of the sixth subdivision will be the Superman. He of the seventh will be the Overman. Um, and that's an interesting concept too. There's a movie called Waking Life, uh, and there's the scene where there's this old man, and he says, the difference between the average man and Plato is greater than the difference between the average man and a chimpanzee. And, why so few reach these exalted levels that you don't, it doesn't really, once you understand them, you know, it doesn't really seem that difficult. These I'm not trying to demean the revelations and the insights and the wisdom of the great philosophers, but it's once it's understood, it seems all pretty obvious. Um, and I really liked his answer. It's not that people don't have the capacity. The answer to the question lies in another question, which is the most common attribute, human attribute, fear or laziness. In our consideration of the seven minor mental planes, we have merely referred to the three elementary planes in a general way. We do not wish to go into this subject in detail in this work, for it does not belong to this part of the general philosophy and teachings, but we may say this much. In order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes to the more familiar ones, the elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of mineral, plant, animal, and human mentality and life that the black keys on the piano do for the white keys. The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys play their part and in which their presence is necessary. They are also necessary as connecting links of soul condition, entity states, etc., between the several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein. This last fact, giving to the reader who can read between the lines. Man, if you guys knew what I'll try to tell you what I was thinking when I got to that line. That was perfect. A new light upon the process of evolution, and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between kingdom and kingdom. The great kingdoms of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and the esoteric writings are full of mention of them. The readers of Bulwer's Zanoni and similar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Um, can read between the lines. I was thinking about how, he's talking about how these lesser intelligences form like links, or they play lesser roles, but still facilitate what would otherwise be impossible without their presence. And I was thinking about how, it's like the difference between a bundt cake and a strawberry cake or something. Like you can have cakes with just a couple of fundamental ingredients, but in order to have all this variety, and from that variety comes, the really extraordinary developments like New York cheesecake. Uh, and it's a sort of it's all contingent upon the existence of all of these like subtle additives and variations and whatnot. And that reference to reading between the lines, I felt like that was it was a nice synchronicity. Another thing that he mentioned that I want to mention or comment on in passing is this. He said something about how evolution is not quite properly understood. That's really been hitting me hard lately, trying to imagine how it is that people actually think that the complexities of biological existence actually arose at random. Um, so there's like branch chain amino acids that were required that in order for them to form in just the right way, it's like 10 to the 2.5 millionth power probability. And that's just one of the factors that was necessary to come together with time constraints. They talk about how evolution had to have happened over this massive time scale, and that's true. But the thing is, if it was just blind and life was reliant on certain adaptations to occur within limited amounts of time, it changes the story considerably. And I just maybe I'm stupid. I mean, but it just seems to me that it's it's just impossible for me to believe that it was absolutely a random process. And more to the point, it's really difficult for me to understand how it is that anyone believes that. It's just too much. It's just too much. And so that reference to evolution not being properly understood, I think, would be something along those lines. Um, Passing on from the great mental plane to the great spiritual plane, what shall we say? How can we explain these higher states of being, life, and mind to minds as yet unable to grasp and understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of human mind? The task is impossible. We can speak only in the most general terms. How may light be described to a man born blind, sugar to a man who doesn't have a tongue, or harmony to the one born deaf? All that we can say is that the seven minor planes of the great spiritual plane, each minor plane having its seven subdivisions, comprise beings possessing life, mind, and form, as far above that of man of today as the latter is above the earthworm, mineral, or even certain forms of energy or matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds so far transcend ours that to them we scarcely seem to think, and our mental processes seem almost akin to material processes. The matter of which their forms are composed is of the highest planes of matter. Nay, some are even said to be clothed in pure energy. What may be said of these beings? On the seven minor planes of the great spiritual plane exist beings of whom we may speak as angels, archangels, demigods. On the lower minor planes dwell those great souls whom we call masters and adepts. Above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic hosts, unthinkable to man, and above those come those who may without irreverence be called the gods. So high in the scale of being are they, their being, intelligence, and power being akin to those attributed by the races of men to their conceptions of deity. These beings are beyond even the highest flights of the human imagination, the word divine being the only one applicable to them. Many of these beings, as well as the angelic host, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe and play an important part in its affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution and cosmic progress. Their occasional intervention and assistance in human affairs have led to the many legends, beliefs, religions, and traditions of the race, past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world again and again, all under the law of the all, of course. But yet, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in the mind of the all, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but still they are but the elder brethren of the race, the advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren, and who have foregone the ecstasy of absorption by the all, in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. But they belong to the universe and are subject to its conditions. They are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. I think by mortal, he doesn't mean what we would mean. I think he's just saying that they're not able to overturn natural law and do anything that's impossible because you can't do that. They're constructed of the same laws, and they are compelled to abide by them. You know, and this idea of like divine intervention in the affairs of the planet is something that has driven a lot of people to atheism and abject materialism because you see, right now there are families getting their apartments blown to pieces, their children dying, their children starving every day. What makes me special or anyone that isn't subject to the atrocities that befall people all around the world? People speculate that it actually is fair because perhaps they have engaged in some horrible behavior in a past life, and so now they're paying their karmic due and retribution. The reality is that we can suspect that, but we can never know whether it's true or not. In my own life, it does seem that there are certain limits that things never go beyond, and that I always have the support that I need somehow, and um, it doesn't seem natural. It's hard for me to believe that it's all been coincidence over all of these years. But it's a very difficult balancing act to relate to that sort of solipsism without feeling repulsed by it. Um, so it's very very difficult for me to make a decision in regards to how I feel about these claims of these are angelic entities and um, their absolute goodness. And one explanation, though, that I can offer that is the best that I've been able to come up with so far in regards to this sort of trying to resolve this paradox in a way that seems reasonable is that there is order and symmetry, and being in alignment with that generally produces positive results. And so to say that you have a destiny and that you're protected and that you are supported more if you have aligned your higher purpose with the collective well-being. But the universe is composed of opposites, and so if there is order, there is also chaos. So it can be true that you have a higher purpose and that you have even angels watching out for you. But tomorrow, maybe I'll go outside the gate and a stray bullet will hit me. That's chaos. The illness that I've been struggling with for all of these years, it's a balancing act of trying to mitigate the unforeseen impact and effects of chaos and entropy on our lives, and staying sort of in congruency with the order and symmetry. And symmetry, the human mind perceives as beauty and harmony. So it's the best I can do to work that one out. Yeah, I noticed the Nietzsche reference. Oh no, Charles, they definitely say that evolution is random, that it's blind. It's not random in the sense that there's no rhyme or reason to it at all, but that there is no intelligent process involved, that it's random mutations. They definitely all say, all evolutionary Darwinian evolutionary theorists, all it's random, random mutations. And I think that, it's really interesting if you pay attention to the way that they speak. They actually talk like Lamarckists, I guess. Lamarck was the other theoretician, but he believed that they weren't random adaptations, but they were, in response to the environment. But I think that the atheist, deterministic materialist, um, reductionist, scientific disposition of the matrix minds, right? They didn't like the implication that there was some sort of intelligence guiding nature. So that's what I mean. Definitely random mutations. That is the Darwinian position, that all of this stuff is just random mutations, and then the ones that serve organisms in such a way as to make them, more successful, they retain those characteristics. But I've always thought that if that was true, why don't we have taste buds in our butthole, or you know what I mean, like a foot in the middle of our head or something? That wouldn't stop you from surviving. It just would just be weird. So I mean, it's I that's what I'm saying about that. That this and also just the develop. If we're talking about just electricity and matter, somehow that catalyzing a single cell developing into a human being. I mean, even just the human brain, being as sophisticated as it is, um, it just it doesn't hold water in my world. I don't know. Like I said, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't really buy it. Of course, there is a huge paradoxical issue with this line of thinking, that in order to develop the level of sophistication and complexity that we see around us in the universe, there had to be some kind of intelligence guiding it. The argument is that, okay, well, then that implies that the sophistication and intelligence that you're saying couldn't have developed at random did develop in random, so that it could influence creation and evolution and structuring of the universe back in the primordial soup. Um, and my answer to that would be that I think that it probably started out super, super fundamental, and it grew along with its creation. It evolved as well in sophistication. Um, but there is some sort of process or organizing principle that we would call consciousness that informed this process. The whole random mutation idea doesn't sit well with me. Uh, Clearly. Okay, so we were talking about the intervention of angels. But yet, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in the mind of the all, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but still they are but the elder brethren of the race, the advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren. Oh, we read that, didn't we? Okay. Only the most advanced Hermeticists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomena is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those whose minds have been carefully trained along the lines of the Hermetic philosophy for years, yes, those who have brought with them from other incarnations the knowledge acquired previously, can comprehend just what is meant by the teaching regarding these spiritual planes. And much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermeticists as being too sacred, important, and even dangerous for general public dissemination. There's a little justification of the secrecy of the mystery schools, in case you missed it. Uh, the intelligent student may recognize what we mean by this when we state that the meaning of spirit, as used by the Hermeticists, is akin to living power, animated force, inner essence, essence of life, which meaning must not be confounded with that usually and commonly employed in connection with the term religious, ecclesiastical, spiritual, ethereal, holy. To occultists, the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating principle. Man, that's awfully close to my organizing principle, carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, mystic force, etc. And occultists know that which is known to them as spiritual power may be employed for evil as well as good ends, in accordance with this principle of polarity, a fact which has been recognized by the majority of religions in their conceptions of Satan, Beelzebub, the devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc. And so the knowledge regarding these planes has been kept in the Holy of Holies in all esoteric fraternities and occult orders, in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them, and the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell owing to their evil actions. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual facts, as all advanced occultists know. I have a crazy story about this. I may have told it in the first segment of this, but if so, uh, pardon me for that. But the day that I got this book, right, it was all weird. I mentioned to my girlfriend that I would like to find the Kybalion because I saw it listed in Aleister Crowley's suggested readings for students in the back of Gems from the Equinox. And so we went out to this little tiny town, and this book, this copy of it, actually was we went upstairs in this bookstore that we stopped in, used bookstore, tiny little thing, dusty, maybe 150 books in there at most. And she pulled it off the shelf and she's like, "Hey, isn't this the book you were looking for?" And so when we got to the hotel room, I was like, okay, so what does Lucifer have to do with all this? And I flipped the book open at random and I'm looking at Lucifer right there on this page. Later, I checked; it's the only place in the entire book where it occurs, and there isn't a tremendous amount of answer here, except that it's the antinomies again, these opposing poles of consciousness, and this is one of the insights that I've had over the years that I've found people are very resistant to. They have a really hard time accepting this. People get really angry at me for even talking about it. But I've always felt that true enlightenment, spiritual power does not, or spiritual understanding, spiritual power, however you want to think of it, does not in any way ensure that a person is going to be good and nice. Not at all. It's just not like that. The universe isn't like that. Um, and it is true that the people that are totally self-serving, the ones that people would call black hats or black magicians, that there is an energetic compensation that is sort of built into the structure of the universe, that you cannot escape, and people call it karma, and that is a fact. Um, but this is just a really difficult thing for people to understand, that this consciousness that animates the universe and that inhabits every cell, every atom, every particle, plant, animal, rock, whatever. It is there for the experience, good and bad, the full spectrum. It does not have a moral disposition. There is no God that is separate from Satan. There's no, you know what I mean? It's one thing doing one thing only. Um, and that this principle of correspondence that we're talking about is that's it in a nutshell. Uh, and that is, when I talk about how we have the four directions plus this dimension that allows us to turn a circle into a sphere, right? Or we have, these four fields of physics, and then the fifth that's the quintessence. Um, that's how these parallels exist because of this one thing and the reflective nature of the rest of its creation. Uh, but yeah, so that's and that's something he's basically confirming here, that my understanding of all of this and my observation and even my direct experience being in Masonic fraternities and Hermetic fraternities is that there are two. Every magician has a choice to make, just as every person does, but a magician especially consciously to choose the left hand path or the right hand path. But the white hats do not hate the brothers of the left hand path because they know that their role, their purpose, their function in the universe is at least as necessary as the white hats. They also are making a tremendous sacrifice. And as just a single eternal element of this one consciousness, as much as you may despise their actions as they're swinging to the left, you are that element on one plane or another. It is you, and it will return. It will swing back just as far as it swung to the left. In fact, there would be no swing to the right without the swing to the left. So um, there's this really great little short story in a book by Aleister Crowley called Conch's Own Pox, Little Essays Towards Light. And it's about this little girl who is the princess. I'll do a video about this. I'm not going to talk much about it, but all fairy tales, or not all fairy tales, but the fairy tale with the prince descending to save or kiss the princess and wake her up, these are Kabbalistic. Um, and so it's the story of this princess who is awakened by the prince of this kiss, who is the higher self. And she begins to follow him up through the Kabbalistic tree of life through the Sephiroth, right? Because when the light descends from Keter down into Malkut, it's going to go back up. Uh, this description of left to right is just relative. It could also be up and down. Um, and so while they're going up, they get to one of the Sephiroth, and she's sitting with a little girl, and there's this being that they see, and she said, and I laughed because the little girl next to me said, "Oh, look, it's Jesus Christ." But my fairy prince leaned over and said, "It is a great secret. Tell no one ever. But his name is Satan, and he is the savior of the world." And that is not the kind of satanic devil worship reference that simple-minded people want to make it. It is the reality that these black hats, or this absolute evil manifestation of consciousness, is suffering and basically paying for its opposite to be extended in the opposite direction, if that makes sense. So this kind of knowledge is why they say that it must be kept secret, um, because most people you cannot be trusted to make the decision until you have properly cultivated your wisdom, your knowledge, your self-knowledge, the doctrine that, nothing is true and everything is permissible is extremely dangerous, even in the right hands, much less in the wrong hands. And there are a lot of people out there that I don't think we would want them to realize that there really are no rules. Um, it's you know it's very um, difficult knowledge, I think, for people to carry to really understand the absolute neutrality of the consciousness that animates the universe. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual. Did we get that far? Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, we did. Okay. Um, as all advanced occultists know, the striving for selfish power on the spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously risen. But to even such a soul, the opportunity of a return is given, and such souls make the return journey, paying the terrible penalty according to the invariable law. And this is true even of just human beings, of course. I went through this, when I last night I think it was, or the last live stream. No, last night the Magic live stream. I was talking about how when I realized that I had to really actually pierce the veil and that I had accessed this true occult knowledge, the secret doctrines. I had entered into the invisible college, and I was like thinking of things, and then they would be there almost immediately. And my ego did inflate. Um, just one example, I had this amazing band that I had manifested, but I was, they like called me out on something one day, and my attitude was basically like, "How dare you question the king?" And I just fired them. And it led to a complete descent. I lost everything that I had acquired. And just as high as I had ascended, including with the spirituality, I descended again and relapsed on drugs. I immediately smashed my finger after I fired the band like 2 days later, and I couldn't play guitar for like a year. So now my life was totally pointless. And I had just gotten off of opiates. Now I can't play guitar. I've lost my band. I realized what I'd done after it was too late, but I had too much pride to just go back and try to make things right with them. In fact, they offered at one point, even, they were willing to forget and forgive and move on. Um, and so exactly as they're describing here, I've made this huge level of attainment, and I just tumbled all the way down, and even just as high as I'd risen, I fell just as low. Um, so, the laws that determine those sort of experiences are absolutely universal. And it's becoming cliche, right? It's the pride always comes before a fall, all the way back to the original Lucifer myth. It's crazy that rock and roll is so thoroughly associated with Luciferianism and the devil's music, and the whole thing of like pride and ego and the inevitable fall that comes from that is repeated in the life of just about every rock star. It's like they are microcosms of this, this archetype of Lucifer. Uh, in conclusion, we would again remind you that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth as above, so below, as below, so above, all of the seven Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, and spiritual. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all the planes, for all are held in the mind of the all. The principle of correspondence manifests in all, for there is a correspondence, harmony, and agreement between the several planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go to make the planes arise from vibration, as we have explained. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomena having its ebb and flow, rise and flow, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on every plane, every effect having its cause, and every cause having its effect. The principle of gender manifests on each plane, the creative energy always being manifest and operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below, as below, so above. This centuries old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of universal phenomena. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of this great principle of correspondence. And so, next is vibrations. Um, Do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. There are options to support in the description and in the chat if you're so inclined. Yeah, that's something I'm giving some thought to. Which which elements correspond to which of the fields and so on. Um, and that kind of work is what the task of the modern occultist would be, the modern mystery school, to advance these things into new territory. If you look in the old grimoires and the old occult books, the old writings about all this stuff, they'll have the correspondences, different herbs and uh, planets and whatever, all the occult correspondences. Um, and so as more of the universe comes to light and is revealed, we can, like 777, the Aleister Crowley book that he apparently plagiarized in its entirety from a Gregor Mathers, is just a book of correspondences, most of them Kabbalistic. So now that we have science has uncovered more of the universe, we can continue to make these correspondences and map out the as above, so below. Uh, um, I don't know, that reality, map it out. And so there's a task for us. Also, you guys, I mentioned the other day that I was going to look at the World Economic Forum, and man, am I sad that I did that. Uh, it's worse than I ever would have imagined. They're saying things totally out in the open now. There's no element or possibility of conspiracy theory. It's not necessary to take anything that's being said out of context. I'm afraid to talk about it on this channel, but at the same time, doing it on Rumble, I don't have really an audience there, and I feel like people need to hear this. Um, so I'm kind of torn about how to go about it. But either way, in the next couple of days, I'm going to either talk about that or I'm going to do it on Rumble and just put a link to the channel. But it was a bummer, man, to watch these videos today, mostly of Klaus Schwab and I don't know the other guy's name, but one of them was said this old thing about people like going to the grocery store and picking what they want to eat and thinking that they're choosing who they're voting for in elections. All that is over. All of it's over. No more free will. I was like, damn, man, that's how they're doing it. They're just saying this shit now. And he also said people think that we're going to get through the pandemic and things are going to go back to normal. And he said that's an absolute fiction. It was crazy to watch this. I'm not stoked. And of course, it does appear that side of things has a direct connection to China. So um, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that stream in a way, but I feel like we have to talk about this stuff. And I honestly feel like the reason that they're just coming right out with it at this point is that they feel like most people won't listen, and the ones that will notice are too few and too limited in their resources to actually do anything to stop it. So, uh, okay, but I mean, they literally had the chairman of the Communist Party in China talking at this thing. So, I mean, I know about your thing with Israel, but as far as like what I can see directly relating to the World Economic Forum and their plan, it's China, um, because they have the leader of China speaking about it. Yeah, honestly, it was just that's weird. You guys, my computer says that there's only one person here, and obviously there are more Have you got? Oh, there's 12 of you. Shit. Yeah, the whole time I thought I was just talking to Mr. Charles, and then I noticed Charles was here, and I thought maybe they were switching back and forth. I don't know, but okay, so um, no, I know it's been going on for years. It's not really new to me. What's new to me is that they're actually talking about it uh, openly, like they are. Um, Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that Israel has something to do with, I mean, didn't you like Trump? Isn't he like really like in with Israel? Um, I mean, at any rate, what all that really matters to me at the end of the day is not pointing fingers at Jews, but um, is just the fact that, it does appear that we're in some serious NWO shit. And I was kind of still clinging to the possibility that it was all going to blow over. But now that I've seen them talking like they're talking in public, I they're not even a little bit trying to hide it, man. And the arrogance of these people, like in their gestures and their body language and everything, man, it was something else to witness this. What else did he say that was just absolutely um, the thing about free will being over? That was nuts. Um, but yeah, I'll post the link. It's Awakening with JP. Um, he just made this video where he has like all of these different videos of not Charles Schwab, Klaus Schwab. Oh, I remember what it was. Okay, so they were talking about hacking the human organism. And then at one point he says all people. He says not. He said we can hack organisms now. And then he's like, well, we can hack humans. In fact, we can hack all of them. And then he says things like the pandemic. He says never let a good crisis go to waste. And he starts talking about how this is the pivotal moment where the problem of the state not having absolute power, we can finally solve this problem. And everyone is involved with this. So it was, I mean, what's his name? Leonardo DiCaprio was sitting in the front row of one of these talks. Oh man, what else? The Facebook guy is involved with it, of course. It's fucked up, man. It's really fucked up. But I'm gonna do a full. I figured out how JP, who by the way is getting a little bit too right wingy for me. I'm almost ready to delete him from my suggested channels because I'm not interested in taking sides. They're both shit and they're just manipulating different people in different ways. Um, and he's increasingly just more and more like just a stock right winger, which is too bad. But I like him so much. I feel like he's a really genuine person, and he's doing almost as much as his audience isn't as big, but he's really, really doing a great service um, by by providing the information that he is in the context that he is. But the way that I think I might be able to continue to talk about this kind of stuff is to do it the way he's doing it. He'll say something and then he'll correct himself and say, "Oh, wait, no," and then he'll say, "What I meant is," and then he'll say the mainstream version as if he misspoke. I don't know how long that'll work, but it's the only way I think that he has been able to keep his videos on YouTube and still talk about this stuff is that he acts like he's being sarcastic or he acts like he misspoke. Um, for me, I can't do it during live streams because I'm not gonna I'm not going to catch it. You know what I mean? I will have to make videos and post them. But that's one of my next tasks is that I'm going to go and find everything I can of Klaus Schwab and some of these other people talking about this because at this point, it's crazy that we have all these completely mindless, like, the way the Kybalion was talking about how a lot of people basically have the same consciousness as like a piece of wood. Um, it really is true. What I was talking about earlier about how Jesus is so obviously just the Son. in the Bible. Like it's super fucking ridiculous that anyone could read it and not like realize what it is. You know, come on, walking on water. You ever seen the sun set behind the ocean? Like it's just so you know that the fact that these religions like that and even stupider ones really. I mean, look at what is the one where they think Jesus came from like Tennessee and the guy had magic gold plates and a hat or whatever and all this. There's millions of them. I mean, Salt Lake City. Uh, yeah, man, I appreciate that. I'm trying to get back into that. Honestly, I'm not happy about this. I feel like it was a huge personal failure on my part. But as I've gotten ill, I completely stopped taking plant medicine at all, and it's not what I should have done. Um, I know that there's some complex stuff going on there, and it's definitely hypocritical of me, and it's just it blows my mind. In my defense, it's not. I felt really bad for a while. You know, I was just basically scared. You know, but I'm almost off of the tramadol, which means I can take ayahuasca again. I'm going to make a video soon about ketamine because I made an amazing discovery. I intuited this, and then I looked it up, and I discovered there was actually research that's been done. And you know, I'm not the biggest fan of ketamine. I hate it actually the way it feels. Like I would never take it recreationally, and it can be very addictive for some people. But it actually totally just stops the withdrawal from opioids, um, and or almost totally, and it even keeps them at bay after it wears off. So, you know, I feel like I have to make a video about this because it's so much better than Suboxone or, you know, any of these options that they currently give people to get off of opioids. Um, and you know, it's really inexpensive compared to a lot of other options. So it really does give people better than kratom, because with kratom you're still going to have these withdrawals afterwards. And so you know, if you have the time to set aside, I mean, you're going to be out of commission if you have to get sick anyways. So you can use ketamine to just walk right out of an opioid addiction. The thing is, like I said, it can be addictive, and you don't want to trade one vice for another. Um, but you know, luckily in my case, I hate it. But so that's where I'm at with all that right now. And then once you know it's safe, I'm definitely gonna start drinking ayahuasca and making plant medicine videos again, because I feel like it's been a huge almost injustice even to myself, because I did get a lot of guidance. I feel like being able to tap into the universal mind and get that kind of guidance and direction that I've had most of my life. My connection to that, even without plant medicine, was always much stronger in the past. Like this illness, and I think probably taking tramadol in order to get functional again, really disconnected me from all of that stuff. So the upside of it is that you know I'm most of the way through it at this point, and I think it's really going to help me make a more powerful contribution to finally get that shit completely out of my system. And you know, the other symptoms of whatever, I've never really gotten a diagnosis. It seems to be getting better. So that kind of content will return. What do you mean you're in China? Yeah, Mormons. I remembered. How are you in China? What? That's crazy. All right, guys, it's getting late. It's like 9:30 here, and I'm really tired today. So yeah, and you know, I know I was a little bit unfocused tonight, but part of it is just haven't seen that video today, man. I already knew that I was in denial about what was happening out there, thinking, you know, really thinking like, okay, maybe they're all right. Conspiracy theorists are all idiots, and we're just all paranoid morons, and it's all going to go away. And that's not happening. Oh, right on. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not happening. Um, So we'll talk about that again soon, and I will